Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Daniel Hendrick Experience. My friends, you are in for a treat today. There's one word to describe this special treat: legendary. We have literally a legend with us today, Mr. Alan Hell. My brother, thanks for being here.
I thrilled to do this podcast with you and be a part of this. It's a cloudy day in Wichita, but hopefully it's a great day where you're at.
And there you go. Well, folks, let me tell you a little bit about this young fella.
Oh, thank you. We're off.
Well into his fourth decade as one of the leading singer actors of today, American bass baritone Alan Held has appeared in major roles in the world's finest opera houses. And you know, that's kind of a cliche term that opera singers use, right, in general.
You have to
Like,
start with that. It has to.
like I've sung in some of the world's famous opera houses, but nothing like this guy, right? This guy, I mean, from the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, Paris Opera, Bavarian State Opera, one of my favorites, La Scala in Milano. I mean, he's sung everywhere. Everybody in the opera world knows them. And my good buddy, the very first guest on this program of all time, John Kai, said, "You got to have Alan on. He's not only an amazing artist, but an amazing human being." So once again, brother, welcome. And if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your journey. How did this all happen?
Wow, that's going back because, as you said, it's only 4 decades as a singer, but there were several decades before that before I became a singer. I grew up in a very small farming town in central Illinois. Um, I'm going to condense things very quickly here.
Sure. Yes,
I,
please.
I started learning piano when I was in second grade, and I started playing the tuba when I was in fourth grade. And
Wow.
was involved. My little hometown had 225 people, I think, in the high school, but we had 90 kids in the band and 90 kids in the chorus. And plus, you could still do basketball, you could still do baseball, you could still do cross country, all those things. And we did everything, and you didn't have to specialize. You could be, and I was involved with everything. I was just that kind of kid. And tuba was kind of my jam, as we would say. In 1972, I was in the Junior High
Oh.
School Band of America, and we traveled, across the eastern half of the country. And actually, that was the first time I was in the Kennedy Center. It had only just opened, and we went to a performance while we were there. Little did I know, well, I fell asleep. I was 12 years old. I fell asleep on the man's arm next to me. I had no idea who he was.
Oh.
Never knew that the Kennedy Center would become such a big part of my
Your
career. But what
existence.
was really great, well, this is the best part of the story, is that night while I was at the Kennedy Center, the Watergate was being broken into right next door. So I was there.
Yeah, actually, there were rumors that there was a 12-year-old that had a key to that building, and
And a tuba. And a tuba.
so
So
I guess in the early days, playing the tuba, that was teaching you support before you knew that you were going to learn what support was.
that's true. I think the support's a little bit different, but it is true. But I always wanted to be an educator. I remember the first time I told my high school band director that I was thinking about getting a career in music, and I think about blew him over. And he was thrilled. He was thrilled, and he and his wife then supported me strongly to go to Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois, where I did my undergraduate studies in music education. And when I started at Millikan, I was as an instrumental major, but I'd also auditioned on voice as well, simply because I like to sing. And there was one teacher there named Jocelyn Reiter, heard me, and she said, "Drop the tuba, stop playing the tuba. You need to become a singer." And once I heard
Wow.
college chorale or college choir sing at a convocation of some kind or something, I knew that's what I wanted to do, was at least sing in a choir. So I called my parents, and they said, "No, we don't mind that you switch to voice, but you have to stay in education." So all of my
Mm.
training was as a music educator, and I'm so grateful that we did go the route. During my senior year of college, then I heard a man named Dr. George Gibson um, heard me sing at a master class, and he invited me to come to Wichita State. And a few things happened along the way, but here I am back in Wichita right now, where I'm the director of the opera program
Back to
here.
your roots.
Back to my roots. I'm still singing, still have performances coming up. Just talked to a company yesterday about something else coming up. But when Wichita State called me, oh, I guess about 10 years ago, to ask if I'd be interested in coming back to teach at some point, I said, absolutely. So this gave me a base. I said, I'm not done singing, but I'm happy to come back and since then I've taken over the entire opera program and also the coordinator for the voice department, and I love. I get to
Beautiful.
go out and sing. I get to do master classes. I still perform. It's just the best of all worlds to be able to do that. Oh, I'm also the director of sacred music at the diocese here in Wichita too. So
Ooh, and I want to
all of
talk
these
more
things.
about that
Yeah.
too. Sure. You know, I can hear the frequency and the tone of your voice. It still sounds youthful after all these years of singing.
I hope so. I was blessed to begin with a very bright, forward voice.
I hear
Um,
that.
Maybe it's an Illinoisian thing. I don't know. But the placement, I remember someone telling me, I think I was about 24, saying, Alan, you will never have notes because I keep the voice very forward.
It's healthy, yeah.
Exactly, and it's just natural. I've always had a very loud voice. When I would do the church pageants for Christmas when I was a kid, my mother would tell me to make sure you speak up so the people in the back can hear you. They could hear me 7 blocks away. uh, it's a blessing to have a voice that's placed well,
Wow.
and it's. I've also found out through teaching has made me a better performer,
Mm-hmm.
and performing has
Yes.
made me a better teacher. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be in the middle. I remember after I was teaching here at Wichita for a year or two, I was in Vienna singing Salome, which is one of those pieces I do a gazillion times. See, John the Baptist is never far away.
There it is.
I was singing Salome, and it was a tiring night. In Vienna, you're lucky if you get 1 or 2 days of rehearsal. And I was pretty tired in this run. And I said, okay, what does Alan Held, the teacher, tell Alan Held, the singer, at this very moment? And that made
Yes.
all the difference in the world. Sailed through the rest of the performance. So, um, yeah, I think that they go hand in hand. That's for sure. And also, it helped when I was coming up in the business. The Metropolitan Opera was the fourth or fifth opera house I ever worked in. It came on very early because I had a large voice. They heard the size of the instrument and they thought, well,
Mm-hmm.
we need to nurture. But in my one of my first casts was Krista Ludwig and of course James Morris and these
Okay.
great singers, and I had to learn. My technique wasn't sorted out yet. I had to learn by watching them in the wings and then walking on stage and having to sing with them, all these people, Nikolai Giorov, Alfredo Kraus, of course, Luciano Pavarotti, Domingo, all of these people.
I
And
don't recognize those names, yeah.
no, I'm not trying to name drop, but I'm trying to say that they had very special techniques
Oh,
that was great for me.
totally.
And especially you look at Alfredo Kraus. My gosh, the man's technique was flawless.
Yeah.
And to just be able to rehearse with them and then perform with them and spend time with them and tell stories with them and listen to them, that was the
Mm.
best education I got, was doing that. Because if I wouldn't have done
Wow.
that, I mean, that's how I learned languages too. Uh, Actually having to use them. And
Yes.
you're sitting in the middle of of a rehearsal of
Rehearsal.
good enough, yeah, and you hear all these native Russian speaking, and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? And you really have to work at it. I remember Nico Castell telling me when I like the first thing I did at the Met, my first year I was an understudy on the opera Lulu. What a piece to start out on. And I had to really work on this piece, and I coached it with Nico Castell. And the first time he heard me, he said, "Oh, you've got so
Wow.
much work. You've got so much work." And I didn't like that. I came in really unprepared, and
Mm.
I didn't know how much really needed to go into this thing.
Yes.
And so I went away then for 3 or 4 weeks. It was still many weeks before the rehearsal period started. And I came back and I had it pretty much perfect. And Nico was like, wow, you've been working your butt off. Well, if I'm going to try to work in those situations, I needed to. And that's learning with it. And that's in that kind of environment was totally influential to me.
There you go. That's really wonderful. Hey, we have a little piece that I wanted to share with everybody. Can you set that up for us?
Wow, this is going back. I was just a puppy.
Mm-hmm.
1990, the Metropolitan Opera Ring Cycle. This is a little clip from Das Rheingold when I was singing Donner. This was one of those productions where I had to learn how to perform real quick. It was my first vodka role.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
I was already learning Wotan because I was doing it the next year in Brussels, but it was only the Rheingold Wotan. Valkyrie Wotan and Siegfried Wotan of this Wanderer, you need to put those off. You need to take time. But the Rheingold Wotan was not so hard. But here I was doing Donner at the same time when I'm singing there with James Morris and Eckhard Laschiha and
Wow.
gosh, who was it? Matti Salminen and Jan Hendrick Rudering, all these great low voices. And I was like, yikes. And so then they put you in this
Yeah.
gorgeous costume and you go up the mountain and you sing Hey Da, Hey Do. And it was just a blast.
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
this was televised. I mean, this is,
Amazing.
I wasn't
Yeah.
even, I think I just turned 30 years old.
Amazing. I always thought I had a big voice until I sang next to James Morris.
Jim. Oh gosh, I'm telling some stories. Jim, in the next after that year, the 1990 when they brought it back in 93, 97, 2000, 2004, I was his understudy for all those performances.
Oh, really?
As well as singing Donner and Gunther and Götterdämmerung. Of course, I was already singing Wotan myself, but I would come back for that Ring production. But Jim, we'd be on stage, wonderful guy. We'd be doing Rheingold, and he'd come over to me about 2/3 of the way through the opera, and he says, "Alan," he said, "I'm really feeling tired tonight. I don't know if I can sing Valkyria tomorrow night. You're going to have to be ready." Like, gee, Christmas is on stage. I'm like, Jim, don't do that to me. I've got to try to sleep tonight now. I can't sleep. And he only twice, whenever I covered him, did I have to go on for him, and it was an honor to get to do it too. Once was in San Francisco. And that was the night after I sang my very first Wanderer in Siegfried, and I had to turn around and sing Valkyria the next night. And the other nights were in Paris when we were both singing Hoffmann. We were scheduled together, but there was a night that he couldn't sing, and so I went on for him as well. But these colleagues, we have these legends that we think, oh my gosh, but they're just great people. Jim and I would go out for Easter dinner in Munich. Pavarotti had us over for Coke and cookies one day. We had you get to see people how they really are, and they're
yes
than you are. So
wow. Okay, well, let's check it out, man. And thus, ladies and gentlemen, why they acclaim him as the actor-singer right there. And you were telling me that you had to learn in that moment but that was pretty dramatic. You holding that axe, whatever that thing was.
That is not very steady, and you're kind of shaking the whole time, and it's like, oh god. And I'm sitting here thinking as a teacher, okay, fix that, fix that, fix that, fix that, And then I'm thinking, for a 30-year-old kid, that wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
So. Are you kidding? Yeah, I heard the way you popped into the head voice on the one high note, and the alignment was pretty good.
I was just beginning to learn how to do that at that time. I mean,
wow.
I think the night of my Metropolitan debut was in Billy Budd. I was singing Mr. Redburn. He has a high F sharp, and I'd never sung an F sharp in public. I had to do that
Mm.
on the night of my Met debut. And not only that, he also has a high G. I had to do that on stage as well. So, like I said, you learn by doing. You can't say just say in the
Mm-hmm.
studio the whole time. You've got to put
No.
it out there. You've got
Yes.
to put it out there. And you sometimes you fail. All right.
Yes.
But
Yes.
failure only leads to success. And you've got to go through those experiences. And yeah, yeah, I'm just very grateful that I had that time. So,
That's
oh,
wonderful.
no, see, it's easier now.
I can see you have that. We could talk for 3 hours just about that process right
You
there.
know why it was easier? Because I didn't think about it before I did it too.
Uh-huh.
I always say, as singers, we're not paid to think. We're
There
paid
you
to
go.
sing. And if we start thinking about everything before we sing all the time, it has to get to a point that it's just natural. And then,
Yes.
it happens.
That's a whole brain thing too, how to
Oh,
it's the same with the baseball player. If you're getting up to the plate
yeah.
and you're thinking about where your elbow is and your feet are, you're screwed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was a basketball player, and I'm 6'5", big surprise there. But
Oh my God.
the whole thing with the shot and the release, it has to be smooth. There's one motion. You can't stop and jerk in the middle of it, or the shot's going to go awry. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, they interviewed Steph Curry about that, the greatest
About his
shooter of all.
singing, about
Yeah,
Rheingold.
exactly. Can you imagine?
Oh my!
But and he said a similar thing. He's like, when I'm in that place, the worst thing I can do is think about it.
Absolutely. There are
Something to that effect.
there are performances, and it happens very rarely, actually, where all of a sudden it crosses through your mind, wow, this is really going well tonight, and
Hmm.
like you do almost anything. And I think back because I equate a lot of my performing to sports, to athletics, because that was a big part
Me
of
too.
growing up.
Yes.
And I think there were a few games that I was like, people give me the ball tonight, I'm having a night.
You're
You know,
not, you're on.
just night. And those are the night, like when Steph will score out and we'll go out and put up 50 or something like that. You just know it's the night that's going to happen.
Yes.
I find it usually in recitals more than opera performances. I feel like, okay, wow, this is really vocally. I'm in the spot. I'm in the groove. This is really great. And then you can caress notes. You can do high note floating. You can do all these things that you wouldn't want to try out in opera. Sometimes
Yes.
depending on
Yes.
and the conductor. And of course, in that clip, you had the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra underneath you, and you just like,
Oh,
wow, what?
not bad, brother. Not bad.
No, no. And James Levine conducting it. I mean, uh, yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
You are definitely up there in the legend category, my friend.
Oh, oh,
Uh, so I wanted to talk to you. I heard you talking on an interview, and you were talking about Wagner versus Verdi
hmm?
and how you felt, which I happen to agree with.
Oh, that good.
Verdi is a lot. Yeah, because, hey, I'm the podcast host, right? So I'm the authority. So, anyhow, but I am in total agreement with you. My genre was kind of Puccini, but I did some Wagner. But I've always felt that Verdi was a little bit more Olympic and required of the voice a lot more kind of gymnastics than Wagner. Is that your?
I agree with that. First of all, in a typical Verdi aria, you'll see more of an extreme of a range than you
Yes.
will in a Wagner aria. If you're through compose, I mean, if you want to call them arias, Wagner stays more in the same tessitura and without all the leaps. Wagner
Yes.
requires more breadth of sound, but less height of sound.
Extension. Uh huh.
There's the word.
And
And
speed. And speed.
absolutely.
You don't
And
have the La Donna Mobile with you going
thank
boom, boom, boom.
goodness, thank goodness. No, everything you get a chance to just concentrate before you sing. When you approach the high notes, there's a good approach to it. Wagner, for all of his flaws, was an absolutely incredible genius. Absolute incredible genius.
Yes,
And people think Wagner orchestras are so big, they're
they
so
are.
powerful, and they are. There's a lot of people down there in that pit when you're singing. Sometimes you look down there and you go, "Oh my gosh, there's 95 of them and one of me." Same thing with Strauss. Same thing with Strauss. I sing Electra. You need 117 people who you're trying to sing over. I mean, that's incredible. And I talk about that with students. I mean, Broadway is the original. Opera is the original music theater that Broadway has taken. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're the
Mm-hmm.
original music theater, and we did it without microphones. We did it without all of those
Yes.
aids. So you have to learn, especially in Wagner and Strauss, to be a part of the orchestra, to not try to sing over and make,
Over that.
I'm going to sing over all those people and hit to the back wall. No, you have to find yourself, even though you're on the stage, you have to find your place in that overture where your voice, your solo line comes through. And Strauss did the same thing when he, all of a sudden he'd use a flute part for this or a trumpet solo, or it happens all the time, and Wagner too. And you'd have to find out where your place is in that orchestra and
Mm.
realize that you're the soloist with them, but don't try to overpower them, because you won't, and you won't make it to the end.
Yes.
If you're singing Valkyrie or Hans Sachs, for crying out loud, when the third act of Meistersinger is 2 hours long, which is longer, and that's just music, which is longer than the music in all of Bohème and most of all.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I sing Scarpia now quite often, and which I love singing. I
Ooh.
mean, it's so
What a
great.
role. What a role.
Oh my gosh, one of the greatest entrances in opera.
Mm.
But the
And such a nice guy he
oh
is.
golly, I want to take him home to meet my wife. No, when I'm singing the role, the first act's over really quickly. You end with the Te Deum, and it's fabulous. And then you're all of a sudden you're halfway through the second act, and you're, my gosh, this evening's almost over. Because
Yes.
you die at the end of the second act, and who cares what happens in the third act? You know she's going to jump. So it's just so fast, and it's a
Right.
different kind of singing. You've got to pace yourself a little differently in
It's different.
like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a little anecdotal story about Tosca. You probably don't know, but early in my career, I was 22. I lost my voice. It was called spasmodic dysphonia. And back then, they didn't even know what that was. They were just beginning the scoping. They scoped me. They couldn't find out anything was wrong. To make a long story short, years later, make my debut at City Opera, sing it at San Francisco. But my mentor was Giuseppe Di Stefano, and his Tosca was like the standard, right? And so I'm on stage. The Tosca was Pamela South. I don't know if you remember her.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and
Central City.
I am right. I am there singing E luce van la stella, and the tears start rolling down my face, and I'm crying while I sing it.
Oh,
But I was crying because I was so grateful to God
amen.
that I was even able to sing above a G, let alone just finishing the opera Tosca.
For that moment in time, you were designed to be there, and
Mm-hmm.
no question that not only were you blessing others, but you were being blessed greatly. And that's wonderful that you had that while you're singing.
It was profound.
Yeah, yeah.
Gratitude,
Absolutely.
gratitude.
Absolutely.
And of all the ups and downs that I have had in my career, which I document, by the way, in my book, Know You Know, the story of how
a copy of that.
I'm going to send you a copy, of course. And it's really about one day I was playing with my dog. The dog growled. I growled back, and I felt a shock from my brain to my cords.
Oh.
And I went, because I was like talking before, like spasmodic dysphonia, like the nephew of John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Anyhow, and I felt that first connection to the full body of my cord that I hadn't felt in years. And that was the beginning of getting my voice back. Then a few years later, I made my debut in Mephistopheles at City Opera with Mark Delavan.
Oh, Mark, great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Gorgeous voice.
30 years ago when we first performed together. And he's one of those guys that we stay in touch on Facebook, or every now we'll send each other a note. These friends,
one of those
friends and colleagues that you make, and it's like you're talking about John Kais. I mean, you go years without seeing each other, but then you pick up right back because you're sharing experience. But for you to go through such a vocal crisis,
8 years,
and come out so well on the other side,
mm-hmm.
that's truly amazing. That's a blessing. That's really impressive.
So, as I was telling you in the book, I kind of document all of these spiritual experiences that I had. How about you? Has faith played an important part of your life and your journey?
it's the foundation of everything I do. It almost sounds too easy to say that, but
I get it.
I can think back. It probably started for me even when I was, I don't even know. It was before I was a teenager. I know that. But we lived right across the street from the Presbyterian Church in my little hometown where I grew up, and I started playing for services very early on, uh,
Mm.
a piano, and I never could figure out the organ because my legs don't fit underneath the thing, so I can't get the feet going. So
A little
yeah.
too tall.
But fortunately, I have really big hands, and so I can play octaves and a lot bigger than octaves with my hands. So I've covered with it. But anyway,
Excellent.
I just had some great Christian mentors in my life. But my wife and I were married in 1982 and had been married a few years. And when we both converted to Catholicism, which is
Mm.
really quite a jump
That's a
from
jump.
really quite a jump from where we came from, and we were raised Presbyterian. But I just can't imagine a time where the Lord wasn't present, because he always was. Maybe I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
present, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of a time that he wasn't present with me and leading me through some pretty bad times, pretty dark times. I mean, I can remember talk about John Kai's again. We had just sang at the festival in Munich, and we said goodbye to each other at the airport that morning in Munich. And I was flying on to Turin, and he was flying back home, I think. And I had been sharing some faith things with John while we were in Munich. And when I got to Turin that night, I think it was, I called home to see how my wife was doing because she was pregnant with our fourth child, and we found out the day we lost that child, that day
Mm.
miscarried. And so here I was in Turin, getting ready to sing Meister Singer, and I was devastated, absolutely devastated. And John got a hold of me. He says, "You know all those things you were telling me, when we were in Munich together? He says, now you need to lean upon that." And he was absolutely right.
Mm.
He was absolutely right. And as time that turned out to be a really rough month. We lost the baby. My wife came down with Bell's palsy. May have been related. I don't know. We never will know.
Mm-hmm.
Fully
Mm-hmm.
recovered. Fully recovered. Then my dad passed away a few weeks later, and we went through a pretty dark time. I think in my faith and all, I felt really kind of attacked, and we drifted away from the church for a few years. Even though we were attending a Protestant church, and that was all
Mm-hmm. When you say you felt attacked, what do you mean by that?
with all these bad things happening at one time. There's
Got it.
sad,
Like karma was coming down on you or
and I
something.
didn't have the tolerance and patience of Joe. I just didn't have that. And
Got
as
it.
much as I would have liked to have had that, but I don't know that I was foundationally as strong as I needed to be for the battle.
Mm-hmm.
So we stepped away for a while, and then after several years, I realized that something was greatly missing. And I remember I was doing Hoffman at the Met, and a friend of mine who's a priest who just passed away. That's another incredible story.
Mm.
Was coming to the performance, and so he led me back into the church after that performance in my dressing room at the Metropolitan Opera. So there's oh gosh, let me tell you, there's so many experiences where. And it's not just a thing about saying, okay, I really need you at this moment, God. I really need you, Lord. I really need you to help me through this time. Please bless me, blah, blah, blah. Yes, 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 yes. Of course, we need that. But it's the times that you just feel that he's walking with you all the time without you even need to reach out because you know he's there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those are the times
Mm.
that then you walk off and you say, yeah, okay, yeah, I know it. I feel it. I feel it. And it's not just a
Wow.
feeling,
A knowingness.
it's a knowingness. There you go. It's a place of being with the Lord. It's a
Mm-hmm.
place of yes, it's more comfortable, all that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you can do anything. You can do anything. And
Yes.
I'm a little farm town. People where I come from do not go into opera.
Yeah, me too.
For this reason, he had me do what I do. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Hadley grew up about 40 miles from me, northwest. His aunt
Mm.
was a fifth grade teacher in my school,
Oh my
and
gosh.
he and I would remark, "What is this?" I, I never saw an opera till I was in three or four. I never planned on doing it. I remember going with my girlfriend at the time. She's now my wife of 41 years. Um, she was from New Jersey, and we met in college, and we went out to meet her parents. over a spring break, and they got tickets for us to go see Manon Lescaut at the Met.
Ooh.
And I remember Pablo Elvira was in it, and Teresa Tsilascara, and I can't remember who all, but I
Hmm.
remember sitting there one time, and again, I was getting my education degree, and I thought, God, if I could just sing one note on that stage sometime in my lifetime, that
Yes.
would be fulfilling, and I'd be fine.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I've sung a few thousand notes on that stage, but it just
I saw your resume and the list of what I have never. I mean, maybe Domingo I've seen with more than that, but my lord,
it's a
how
lot of variety, and
wow.
it's 7 different languages. I didn't expect to do this, but the Lord do it all along. He knew I was going to,
Wow.
and so everything is an awakening. You know what? And here I am, almost 64 years old. Is that right? Yeah, carry the one. It's almost. I still feel that every day. I still feel something new every day. I'm not.
I
I always said I'm going to sing as long as I have nothing else to learn about singing.
amen.
Singing a long time. Let me tell you,
Yes.
there's a lot to learn. It's the same thing in life. He's going to have me keep learning and keep having me have these experiences, and hopefully, my career is a witness to my faith when I'm talking to other people and my students. And I don't have to go out and beat the drum all the time, although I enjoy doing that too. I don't have to do that, but he's got me doing this for a reason. And every now and then
Absolutely.
you see why.
Wow. Well, I told you I've been stalking you for this interview, so I've been like,
You're the
uh,
one, huh?
and
Yeah.
I'm good at doing all of that, finding everything out. And
Kansas City Chiefs.
everyone that I spoke to said the same thing about you, that he's the real
Uh-oh.
deal. And they all
Who
said,
are these
you
people
guys,
lying about me? Who are these people?
they said, you guys are going to have so much in common because of my experiences with God. And I was raised Pentecostal with
Uh-huh.
gospel music. And
Oh, I love it.
uh,
I love it.
all I did was we grew up with church and sports, right? And music. We did the musicals. And when I
What's
was a
the
young
little?
guy, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The little hometown I grew up in, uh, 1,067 people, Washburn, Illinois, and I don't know if you know anything about automobiles, but the Duryea automobile. I don't know if you ever heard of that. One of
I
the
don't.
founders of the Duryea automobiles was born in my hometown. That's our claim to fame. Uh,
That explains it.
all
There's a
about
seed of greatness there.
but anyway, we had all these little churches. There was a Disciples of Christ church. There was between us and our suburb, Low Point, which was about 250 people. There was two Methodist churches, two Lutheran churches, brother or Church of the Brethren, many Mennonite churches in the area, many of big Mennonite
Okay.
area. But boy, could those guys run cross country too. And Presbyterian churches, there was two of those, and then the Lutheran church was Missouri Synod. And then there was the Catholic Church. Now, all
Ah,
these churches would get together, except for the Missouri Synod Lutherans, would get together for services during Lent on every Sunday night. We go to a different church. It's fabulous. I was in the high school choir, so we would go sing for each week, and the churches would have their own musicians as well. And I can remember at the Church of the Brethren, she was playing piano as an older woman, and she would stomp her foot while she played, which was great. I'm sitting like in the front row, and the louder she played, the higher the leg would go. It was
yes.
hilarious. I don't know why I remember it. I don't remember almost any of the sermons from those years, but I remember that.
The
But
music.
but then we'd all get together in the high school gym for the Palm Sunday service together, and you'd have hundreds
Mm,
of people.
what a culture.
So yeah, exactly. So and also it was all that singing that people did. We were in school systems where music was encouraged,
Yes.
and then we got to the middle of the 70s, and schools around the country started cutting music programs, and we're
Yeah.
reaping the rewards of that right now. When
Mm.
we
You
hear
reap
the
what you sow.
exactly when you hear the problems with classical music and audiences, and because they have not learned an appreciation from a very early age, which we had, and
Wow.
I wrote a thing yesterday. I forget what I wrote it for, though. It really had an impact on me. No, I can't remember. But I said, we're hopefully it impacted somebody else.
Are you
But,
sure you're not a tenor?
oh, please. Oh, no, don't do it to me.
That's
Lord have
great.
mercy. Uh, this
He
was,
does.
amen.
That's why grace is amazing.
I wrote about this very thing about, somebody was talking about what do we got to do for opera in the future, and we have to change this, we have to change this, we have to change it. And I said, no, the problem is, yes, we need all those things, but we can't forget our heritage and our past. We're talking about
Exactly.
a 400-year-old art form that has done just pretty doggone well.
Fine. It
Yeah,
survived.
yeah. And the
Yeah.
history of the singers and the directors and the conductors and the music itself. I mean, I know young singers that I'll sit and talk to, and I'll say, "Can you name me five historic mezzo sopranos? Can you name me five sopranos, tenors, basses, whatever?" They can't. They
Yes.
can't. I said, "Well, then welcome to my opera literature course." And we
Yes.
we delve into
Yes.
all that. So if we throw all of that away, if we don't know, our past, we don't know where we're at right now. Well, how the heck are we going to know where we're headed? And so this is a problem with opera right now. And one of the reasons we don't know our past is because we cut music from the schools. So
Well,
we have got to invest in
yeah.
education. Says you,
I
educator.
I got a student a few years ago who graduated from a prominent university, who I will not
Well, I
say,
know where this is going.
who took the opera literature classes, passed, but had no idea who the singers of the past were. And I'm
Absolutely.
like, how can you not teach that?
I sat in a graduate oral examination, their final exams, and they couldn't name me any of the singers. I said, "You've got to be kidding." They could name me a few present day singers. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you listening to?" "Well,
Yes.
I watch it on YouTube." That's taking away a large part, and your most important part of
Yes.
the singer is your listening. You're being
Yes.
able to hear and discern, and they're taking that part of their instrument and just throwing it away. Because when you watch a video, you're spent so much time watching the video that you're not listening to what's going on. And so
Yes.
we've lost that individuality, we've lost all that, and we've got to start training singers to listen and not just try to produce all the time. Imagine that, you know, imagine.
Exactly.
So,
Yes. Yeah, I've asked a tenor. I want you to listen to Geely and tell me what you think about. Oh, you mean the musical? I'm like, no. And then they're like, oh well, I really love opera. Phantom of the Opera is my favorite.
oh no! Remember, you
and
were
I'm
talking. You were talking to a tenor. Okay.
and then a mezzo. I'm like, I want you to listen to Marilyn Horne. Who's Marilyn Horne? And that's not even that old.
Exactly. One of the recordings I always play in my opera literature course is from the Bing Gala in 1972, I guess. Robert Merrill and Richard Tucker singing the
Oh
fourth.
my God, the Forza duet, right?
Oh,
How
and Birgit Nielsen singing this out of the final scene
and
on
they
that.
were like our age now then,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
were singing like
The
God back
power,
then.
the
Oh,
power, the magnificence, the voice, the pure. Oh my God, let it
yes,
sing. And they sit there, my students sit there and go, I mean, their jaws hit the floor. They
yeah,
absolutely. Well, why don't they know about these people? Why
yes,
why isn't the curiosity being instilled
yeah,
in young singers? And that's, you have to have curiosity in order to be in this business. And again, it's because so many music programs are lacking in the formative years.
uh,
So if
I
we
have
if
taught
we make a difference, we've got to go backwards and
I have
connect with
taught yes, I've taught this young baritone who's doing pretty well singing around, and I said, I want you to listen to Igor Gorin. He's like, who is that?
that.
And when I first started singing, I sang at a restaurant in Palm Springs. It was
Oh,
an
fun.
Italian restaurant, and he was the one that sent me to USC, the owner.
Yeah.
But he was this Italian guy who loved the Neapolitan, but he loved singers. So at the end of the night, when we were done, we'd be at the bar having a drink, and he would play different famous singers of the past,
Yeah.
and we had to guess who each
Yeah.
singer was.
Yeah.
And that was the greatest education I ever had.
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
not only did I learn who they were, but there was a mystery about discovering it, and I learned the love of learning their technique and their way of
And
achieving greatness.
absolutely. And I'll turn on Sirius XM, the operas, and all that, and listen and say, who's that voice? Who's that voice? Who's that voice? The ones that you can say that voice is because you know that voice and the
Yes.
distinctive sound. Now, somebody sound exactly the same, for crying out loud.
Yes.
But
Yes.
those distinctive voices. Now you
Yeah.
said USC. Are you talking California, right?
Yes.
You're not
Oh,
talking that place, South Carolina. I wanted to make sure
ah,
about USC. So
yeah.
were you there when Walter DeClue was still there?
No,
I didn't know when he left there. The reason I
no.
asked is because my teacher was from USC, and
Okay.
they
Yeah.
did so many pieces for the first time in the United States there, like
Wow.
Friedenstock. And boy,
Yeah.
he would Walter DeClue would do all these things, and he was
Uh,
the one who would sit me down. My teacher then was the one who would sit me down, in opera literature course and say, "Listen to this singer, and listen to this singer, and listen to this
yes.
singer." So it must have been something about USC. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and that was back in the day. Thomas Hansen was just a couple of years ahead of me, and Eduardo Villa was there, and the famous teacher of Fritz Wunderlich or
Oh,
Horst Gunther was there. Another,
there
right?
is nothing better than Fritz Wunderlich singing these Bildnis. I mean,
Oh, oh,
that's a
yeah,
desert.
and he's a German that makes it sound almost Italian. It's
He was
so
only about 34 years old at the time.
oh,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah,
I,
you're
I
right.
do
Well, and
I do
that's a very good point, what you said. He was a German that sang Italian. Because, and as a Wagner singer, you must remember that Wagner never had Wagner singers. Wagner had
mm,
European trained singers. So you have to sing it the same.
exactly beautiful. Well, you were definitely a master of that. I've been
Ah,
listening to you, so folks, you guys, you have to go to YouTube. Just type in his name. You're going to find a few really Wagnerian performances of his, which are fantastic. I do have a little God story I want to share with
please, please.
you. So I told you I lost. I was in the Caruso competition for young tenors in Milano. De Stefano was the judge. He was my mentor. I was set to win the competition. I'm not judging what that was. I'm just saying because he brought me there.
Right.
Well, that year I had laryngitis almost the entire year. They could not get rid of it.
Oh, scary.
And so I forced the instrument. I got to sing at this competition. I couldn't, lost my voice. Of course, now we know it's vocal dysphonia, the emotional trauma. He made me walk out on stage on the finals without ever singing a note in any of the divisions and apologize to the audience. Afterwards, he takes me out to dinner and he says, "Not so easy to be a great tenor, is it?" I
Wow.
left and I wanted to kill myself, literally, because that was my whole dream. I worked my butt off to be that guy. I'm on the plane, Alan, and I'm sitting right next to the emergency row door. And in my mind, I'm going to jump out. I'm going to jump out. I'm going to jump out. The only thing that kept me from jumping out of the door was my concern for other people. And I was so in a panic attack, I opened up the Bible and I went to Psalms. And I started reading Psalms, all of these messages. And then all of a sudden, I hear a voice, a baritone voice. Charlotte Aldrich.
Oh,
I'm turning. I'm like, okay, they're wanting to contact Charlotte Aldrich. I don't know who that is. Go back to reading. Charlotte Aldrich. What the heck is that? Not in my head. I'm hearing an audible voice. Well, to make a long story short, the third time happened. I say to the guy next to me, "Did you hear that?" "What?" "Somebody's saying Charlotte Aldrich." "I didn't hear anything." So I'm like, okay, I'm reading. I calm myself down. I get to San Diego. And there was another Mario's restaurant there that he owned where I had been singing. And I went there to have dinner with my parents. And all of the singers came up. "How did it go? How did it go?" "Oh, you don't want to know. It was terrible. I lost my voice." And they were all consoling me. And then this tenor, Glenn DeBreo, was singing Nessun Dorma. And I had heard Glenn for years. And he was not all that great. But now Glenn was glorious. He came over the table. "Hey, Danny, what's going on? How was the trip?" And I'm like, "Glenn, you sound fabulous. What in the world happened to you?" "Oh, I've been studying with Charlotte Aldrich."
had you ever heard of it before?
Never heard of her. Never heard the name.
Wow. Wow. You know what the best part of all that is too is the voice that you heard. was a baritone.
Only a bit. You are a tenor, man. I'm telling you. These
No,
are tenor lines.
that is phenomenal. That's well, what do we hear? That the voice of the Lord is in the wind,
There you go.
and yeah, wow, wow. Any singer who says they have never had one of those nights where you just think, I'm done, I'm finished, I can't do it, they're not telling you the truth. We've all
Yes.
been there. It's a horrible, and it can be on, it wasn't, that kind of level, but oh my gosh, I've had performances where I bombed. I can remember doing one in Covent Garden in a production of an opera that I shouldn't have been doing. I was way too young to be doing it. They cast me in this major league role, and it just wasn't appropriate. And I bombed. I knew I did. I knew the thing was, it was one of those roles that you sing really well in the first, when you first get there in the rehearsal period, and by the time you get to the performance, you can't sing it anymore. For crying out loud, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
singing too much and you're tired, or the production doesn't work for you, or the conductor doesn't work for you. Gee, imagine that. And whatever, for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen. I knew it, and I got shredded in press. I got shredded, and I deserved it. Maybe not in
Yes.
some of the ways that they words they use, but I certainly didn't do my. But I had to learn to take the lumps with it too. And
Yes.
again, then it would come back to the experiences I had in athletics, you know,
Yes.
and of course, my relationship with the Lord, that there was a reason for me to be doing this. Okay, He didn't
Yes.
promise it was going to be easy. Like you said, it wasn't going to be easy to be a world class tenor. And I've listened to your recordings. Well, I spied on you as well. I mean, there's
Mm.
phenomenal singing going on there, Daniel.
Thank you.
And to again, he wasn't done with you yet, so he pointed you to the way to go, to Charlotte
Mm-hmm.
Aldrich, for crying out loud. How long did you study with her then?
I did for 2 years, and here's the hook. Charlotte didn't really fix my voice, but she helped fix me.
Ah, ah, there you go.
And so at one point, I was vocalizing, and she slammed. And now here was she was a teacher at San Diego State of voice, right? She slammed the piano down, which she would never do. She got pissed, which she would never did.
Mm.
She looked at me and she said, "Let it sing. It knows a hell of a lot more about singing than you do."
Oh, wow, wow, that's so true. Again, we're not paid to think. You know,
There
I
it is.
say every week, probably 2 or 3 times a week, teaching voice is 30%, working with voice, 70% working with the mind. You have to be a trained, almost psychologist or something, so
There you go.
especially in these days of teaching now, post COVID, and so many
Yes.
students have been, damaged and fractured by life here the last several years. You have to really um, tune in to the person almost more than the voice.
Be trans
He did that to you. Yeah,
Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
exactly.
She used
Exactly.
to tell me that verse many, many years ago.
Wow.
And now on my website, folks, if you go there, you'll see a link for what I call neuro singing, because I use a lot of neuroscience. And a lot of it came from my sports background.
Mm-hmm. What were your sports?
Baseball, from 5 years old all the way through high school, wrestling,
Yeah.
football,
Mhm.
just about anything. So the same messages. It's like sports psychology,
Mhm.
the famous batter goes into a slump, and he goes to a sports psychologist. When was the last time you really felt good about playing? When I was in Little League. She's like, okay, what did it smell like when you got to the ballpark? How did you feel? And then she made him take that to the big leagues when the next time he got up to bat. And then all of a sudden his batting average started. That's a true story, by the way.
Oh, wow.
It's
That's
about using the other side of the brain so that you're not using cognition to try to drive vocal technique.
absolutely.
Of course, there's a point for that when you're practicing and studying with your teacher, but not in the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
You have demonstrated that. It's one thing like what I did for a short period of time. You did it for multiple decades.
And hopefully a few more. No, I don't know about that.
Yeah, right?
It hit me this year when I was at the Met. and I looked at the roster, and I sung in the '80s, the '90s, the whatever those the aughts, the and this last decade too. So I was in my fifth decade of singing in the Metropolitan Opera, and I
That's
wasn't.
like a Jerome Hines thing, who was like,
I think he made five. He might have made six. Jim Morris made five or six. Um, there was only two singers that were on the Met roster who sung in the '80s still on the roster. And yes, it's an incredible blessing, but I recognize that. But again, I go back to, why was I supposed to do that? Why was it all? Why is all this? It's Gesamtkunstwerk, as we like to say.
mm-hmm.
It's all the elements of life and all the experiences and everything coming together. And without one part of that, we're not in that total Gesamtkunstwerk. So that part
Yes.
had to happen for me, or I would not be the person I am. You know, I was back in Illinois in my home area just last week to visit my 92-year-old mother. And it was a great time. And my little hometown had a new barbecue restaurant, which was so good. And it was just great to, when I see those cornfields and I see those bean fields, and I know that I used to walk those fields and I used to pull weeds in them and I put hay up in the barns that are around there. It's all part of the experience. And I see a
Wow.
name. I'll go walking through the cemetery of my hometown and I see the names of people that it's history to me. And that's all part of the Gesamtkunstwerk. Everything, in the middle of a performance, some of those things pop into your mind. I don't
Yes.
know of a performer who just is so into being Rodolfo or so into being Scarpia or Botan that they can't think of something else in the middle of a performance. All kinds of thoughts go through my mind. Where's dinner tonight? What am I doing? All those things go through my
Sure.
mind too.
Sure.
But people and experiences of life pop in as well. And I'm like, I'm going to use that tonight. That's something. So it's all together. I have no idea how I got off on this tangent,
It, well,
but
it's a great point, and that's the whole. You are demonstrating the neuroscience that I'm talking about. You're using your imagination and memory
yeah,
to activate into
absolutely.
real practice some energetic force that helps you in that performance.
That's exactly right. You're exactly. And I can just imagine when you talk about baseball. When I think back to my days of Little League, I remember the smell of my glove, or the leather balm that you would put in it to loosen it, or the smell of a new baseball when they take it out of that little box and it'd be a
Oh,
little paper in it. I mean, that's it doesn't get better than that.
yes.
That's what growing up was, and getting that 15-cent ice cream cone at the end of the game if you won. Those kind of experiences come back. You know,
Yes. And they are not just a fantasy or a daydream. There are practical applications on how it can change your performance.
and you have to be open and be in touch with that. Just
Yes.
like you have to be open to the Holy Spirit working in your life too. You've got to be open to all of life at one time. And when people start to shut down, well, that brings
Uh,
unhappiness, that brings despair, that brings depression, all of those things. You, we think we're protecting ourselves so much of the time, where we're hurting ourselves. So we have to open it up.
man, absolutely. Brother, I can't wait for you to read my book because you're
I
going to
can't either. I
see
can't
a
either.
lot of these stories. A lot
Well,
of these
I read it ahead.
stories.
That's where I got it on. No.
Okay. Well, you did say one thing I found fascinating. You said, that's not who I am. Who are you?
Good question. It's easy to say that I'm just me. I am who the Lord created me to be. At least I'm trying to be. Um, I think I am an open person, open to whatever is ahead of me. Um, I was thinking earlier today, isn't it interesting that the Old Testament begins with, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And then the New Testament begins, in the beginning was the Word.
Word. The word was
Exactly.
with God.
Exactly. So, and people talk about what's your favorite, favorite verses and everything. And I think that's probably my favorite. In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth, because starting from there, at that moment, then everything, you want to talk about evolution, but if you want, everything came out of in the beginning. And I think that I'm a person that's kind of an in the beginning person. I feel that I'm constantly being created, constantly being molded, constantly being put to new experiences, to have new people come into my life, to have me do this job, to have me go out into the performance. I mean, why was I flying off to do that in that city at that moment of time? There's a reason for it. And I may not always know the reason. And maybe it's going to be revealed to me at some other time, or maybe it won't. It doesn't make any difference. I'm
Mhm.
just trying to be open to whatever comes when I'm, when it's supposed to, or when the Lord allows, or whatever. And there'll be things that I think that I should be, that should be something I should do. The Lord says, no, no, we're
No.
not going to do that yet. It's not time.
And there are times when it's, at least in my experience, where it's clear that you should do something, but perhaps you're afraid or you're intimidated.
Right?
And you have to say, by that knowingness that I
Mm-hmm.
have this communication, I'm going to go.
Yeah,
I'm going to
absolutely,
do it no matter
absolutely,
what.
absolutely.
And I can say, in my personal experience, never has that equation failed me.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I can't remember there were four things. I could look them up. They're somewhere on my computer that I used to think were important to evaluate when I was offered a new contract or a new a role to sing. Is do I have the talent? Do I have
Uh
the
huh.
skill to actually sing
Yes.
this role? Do I have the desire to do it? What is the impact that this is going to be upon myself, upon my career, upon others, etc.? And you really have to evaluate these things to um, know what value it is as part of who you are. Again, to use that word,
Mm.
words, because if you're going out to do, I mean, I was offered a few years ago a world premiere of an opera. It's been more than a few years, and the opera hadn't even been completely written yet, as these things go. And but I said, well, send me some samples of the composer's music, and I liked it. I thought good music. Okay, so send me a libretto. Well, the libretto came, and it was so foul, so foul. It was also so full of language and things that I just couldn't pull off. There's no way.
Mm.
And I said, I can't have my kids come to the show and see me do this. I can't make this work. Okay, maybe it's my flaw, maybe whatever. I cannot make this work. And so
I
you
get
have to
it.
say, I cannot do this. Now, people say, well, how did you sing Bloodsack? How did you sing? I play a lot of bad guys. Bloodsack's not a bad guy. He's just tormented. And
Scarpia.
there you go. That
He's
guy.
kind of a bad guy.
And because evil exists.
Yes,
Evil exists.
he
And
does.
if for that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 6 hours, however long it is, I'll be the face of evil.
Sure.
So the contrast to what good is as well. Because fortunately,
Yes.
opera good almost always wins out. So again, that means I'm usually dead. But there is, and you see it in the second act of Valkyria with Wotan and his long monologue that he goes through, the torment that he goes through of what is right and what his desire is.
Yes.
And that's where the entire ring cycle spins on. That's where the whole thing happens right there. You have
Mm.
to capture those moments and build upon them. And so and that's a lot of life. You have to know what is possible and what is necessary. And
Wow.
yeah, that's I
That
guess
is cool stuff. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, we have just heard from a legend. And I'm so privileged to say a brother. I share a lot with your philosophy of life and your perspective. And I'm in awe of the career that you've had. Just like I'm in awe of the length of like Placido Domingo's career and Pavarotti's career. How Richard Tucker, Merrill, how they did it so long. It's one thing to do it and get there, but to stay there like you have done
that's the hard part.
is remarkable. And I just want to say I have been honored to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts that you have for us or more wisdom?
Thank you, and thank you, John Kais, for suggesting this. Thank you
Yes.
for having me and for us to have this conversation. It's so important for people to share life together and to share experiences because hopefully it enriches someone else, it helps somebody else. But
Yes.
to bring that out of yourself when you say, talk about this or everything, sometimes it's all in there, but you don't think about it. And you've given us an opportunity to talk and hopefully share.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
greatly appreciate what you're doing, Daniel. Greatly.
Thank you, brother. So, folks, go to my website if you get a chance, and it's danielhendrick.com. And check out my book, Know You Know. It chronicles my life's journeys, the ups and downs, losing my voice, everybody in the world giving up on me, laughing at me, telling me it was impossible, ministers coming, a rear admiral from the Navy coming and telling me I had to give up. It wasn't God's plan. But guess what? When you know, that which appears to be a miracle is not a miracle at all. So I encourage you to grab that. My brother, God bless you, and thank you. Folks, thanks for listening to us today. God bless. Bye-bye.